everyone. I'm Rebecca Otowa. Thanks very much to Steve Redford for organizing this event today. We are here to talk about our experiences of being writers in Japan. First, let me introduce myself briefly. I am American by birth, and my upbringing was in Australia, where I first studied the Japanese language in high school and university. I came to Japan to study Buddhism in 1978 and graduated from Otowa University in Kyoto in 1981. That same year, I married Toshiro Otowa. Since then, with two long absences, one to the US in 1983 and one to Germany in 2017, I have lived in the old farmhouse in Shiga Prefecture that he inherited, caring for the house and land. As far as writing goes, I have been reading and writing since I was a small child. My mother made sure I loved reading by reading to me at night and taking me to the library regularly. Lots of reading leads to good writing. It promotes understanding of plot and characters and extends vocabulary. When I was a primary school child, I wrote newspapers and stories for my family. I used to hold events in my bedroom in which I read aloud from my favorite books and even charged my family admission. In schools in Australia, I was the only one I know who loved answering essay questions on examinations because it was an opportunity to write. When I came to Japan and got married, I joined the Association of Foreign Wives of Japanese, which recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. This organization publishes a closed circulation quarterly journal with various articles, and I became a regular writer with a column called Life in the Doinaka. In these days, I mostly wrote humorous pieces. I see now that that was a way of coping with my difficult situation in my Japanese home. I spent 12 years living with my mother-in-law and learning how to become a Japanese wife according to her rather old-fashioned ideas. Learning the responsibilities of being a resident of our small village and growing vegetables and flowers on our land. I also raised two sons who went to local schools, so I was a PTA member as well as a member of various town organizations, a member of a local music group, and a children's music coach. I taught English to various age groups and also worked as a translator and editor. My life observing and, to a certain extent, mimicking the Japanese was an education in how other people deal with living and being human. I discovered many differences between the West and Japan, and these things provided a lot of material for writing. I must say, though, that the way I wrote about my experiences changed as I changed during my life here. After 20 years or so, I realized that in trying to be Japanese, I had lost a lot of what made me me. The two readings I have chosen for today reflect the changes that happened in the past 20 years in the way I viewed my life and what I was expected to do during this long time in Japan. In 2004, I began to write a collection of essays about my home and life, handwritten on large sketchbooks with color illustrations. I wrote this collection out of gratitude to my home, which has sheltered and protected me throughout my life here. The house itself has a strong, benevolent spirit, which is not really any particular culture. Through a friend, I managed to have a talk with the CEO of Tuttle, a prestigious Asian publishing house, and he agreed to publish my book with certain changes, which I agreed to. This book became At Home in Japan, published in 2010. I'd like to read one of the last essays in the book, Taking Root, which describes the experiences of one who has made her home in another country. At this time, I was still very much thinking of myself as someone who had to fit in with the society around me. The Japanese translation of Taking Root was made by my friend Sachiko Moore. Taking Root. It's a dry, warm, still day in early November. My onion seedlings, in their month or so of early life in my front yard, have grown into sturdy green spikes about 20 centimeters high. Kneeling between them and the celery plants next door, I loosen the surrounding dirt with a trowel and with a gentle, steady pressure, pull out the bunches of seedlings with their soft, white, thread-like roots. I lay them into a garden carrier and, seeing the baby roots exposed and blinking in the strong sunlight, I cover them with a powdering of soft soil. This, I hope, will ease their trundling wheelbarrow journey to my other field, 5 minutes walk away. Each rectangular bed usually holds about 100 seedlings planted one by one, about 10 centimeters apart. It may be an hour or more before the last one in the carrier is placed in the hole prepared by my burrowing, gloved fingers. The hairy roots coiled underneath so as not to leave any tendrils trailing out on the surface. And finally, the shoot braced with a handful of patted down soil. At the end, my back creaking from the effort of kneeling, stretching, and moving gradually down the rows, I straighten gratefully and sprinkle first golden flakes of rice husks and then water from a watering can over the completed bed. The transplanting is finished. My work is done. The work of the little onion children is just beginning. This is not the landscape of their babyhood. Where are the reassuring sheaves of celery towering nearby? No house, no car, no cats, just a flat sweep of often windy terrain. And who knows whether they can appreciate the spectacular view of the mountains. Instead of being comfortably jammed together, their intertwined roots have been untangled, and a lonely handspan's distance now separates them. The soil here tastes different to the little clusters of roots, which must now begin to explore and take hold. Through days of sunshine, clouds, rain, and wind, through nights of moonlight, and later through frost and snow, the dear wish for survival pours itself from one moment to the next as the onion children slowly adapt themselves to their new home and begin to grow. Plants have no choices, only imperatives, and the greatest one is to survive long enough to fruit, set seed, and ensure the next generation. How graceful, how peaceful are these little lives without choice. Clearly they want to live, but if this should prove impossible, their thread of survival thins down and finally disappears. With no resentment, no railing against their maker, simple as a sigh, they rejoin the ground of being. I wonder what it would be like to live and die that way, without the everlasting fanfare of humanity. It's true that for us, as for every other creature, death waits. Our unique situation is that we know it. And this is a black motif in the sand painting of our day-to-day experience. But the other colors, the designs, the complexity of our lives, the brilliant flare before the dark, the dance over the abyss, all these come from choice. This is the other side of the coin of consciousness, to see beauty or not, to create or not, and ultimately to live and die gracefully or not. The night is coming, but our choice can be the beautiful sunset. It was choice that transplanted me. Personal choice has a size, it has limits, which are opposed by society, by upbringing, by character, and by the very choices which came before. Every choice can be as small as next door or as large as across the world. Looking back, I can see the choices made by myself and others that led to this present life, so far away from the one I knew as a child. The circumstances that brought me here to Japan are infinitely more complicated than the transplanting of the onion children. Yet I like to imagine that in some way, obscure to my limited vision, it was some universal hand that dug the hole and settled me into it and patted down the soil around my fragile roots. Probably only those who have elected to be similarly transplanted could fully understand the pain, the difficulty, the complexity of the period of acclimatization which followed. And we are a small band, we transplants, a very small percentage of humanity as a whole. Slowly, my roots went down into Japanese soil. My progress, growth, flowering, and seeding have been helped along by many others, mostly other transplants, who could reach out and feel my enduring as well as their own. Friends in groups, such as the Association of Foreign Wives of Japanese. I like to think that I have helped some of them too, as they put down their roots. Now, decades later, I am a strong tree. My roots are deep. I love the taste of Japanese air and water, the particular angle and strength of Japanese sunlight, the changes of Japanese seasons. I have flowered and seeded many years and hope to do so for many more. I am one of the lucky ones. Living this way in circumstances of otherness gives me a deeper dimension to feel the plight of all people. All of us are transplants. All of us are uprooted, both from our mother's wombs and even earlier from our ground of being. All of us, so many times during our lives, find our fragile roots struggling for purchase in rocky and inhospitable soil. The terrain is unfamiliar. We may at times be without the water of love or the sunshine of divinity to encourage us in our assimilation. What supports us for a short or long time as measured on the earth is life itself. The grand outpouring of life, its seamless and abundant flow from moment to moment, is a force so strong we are unaware of it, as a fish is unaware of water. It is this force that overrides the problems and hardships and carries us strong and true and sure in the direction of our destiny. I survey the completed bed and cheer on my onion children, starting their journey in their new home. Do your best, little seedlings. May you find everything you need for your growth. After I wrote my first book, Tuttle approached me with the idea of writing a children's book to showcase my illustrating skills. My Awesome Japan Adventure was published in 2013. Unlike many books about Japan, this book is not set in Tokyo, but in a rural community. A fifth grade boy from the United States spends 4 months in a homestay family. I enjoyed doing this book a lot because it taught me many things about layout and watercolor drawing. Together with Tuttle, I also had a good time deciding what kinds of things would interest and pique the imagination, both of my fictional 5th grader and of the children who would read his adventures. There were workbook pages, how to make onigiri, bowing, karuta, as well as historical pages, one of the early merchants of Omi, also one on ninja, and cultural topics, tea ceremony, visiting a shrine. The 3rd book I published with Tuttle was a book of short stories, The Mad Kyoto Shoe Swapper. This is a collection of 13 stories which I began writing in 2010. Some came from experiences of my own life. For example, the title story, which arose out of a time when visiting a temple in Kyoto, I returned to the entrance to find that someone had taken my shoes. Some were stories of village people. For example, the first story I wrote, Rhododendron Valley, about a man in our village who committed suicide in order to save his family from financial ruin. And some were from my husband's family history. For example, Showa Girl, about my mother-in-law's early life and marriage decision. Others, like the one I am going to read from, Love and Duty, I worked up after hearing the story from a friend. This story is quite long, so I have decided to read just the last part here, which means that I have to explain what it leads up to. It's a story of 2 women, one American, Joanne, and one Japanese, Sayako. And the story alternates between the 2. They work in the same school, and the Japanese woman wants the American woman to give her 6-year-old son chocolate for Valentine's Day. The custom of women giving chocolate to men on this holiday is a Japanese invention, not practiced in the West. So Joanne, who has been used to romantic notions of Valentine's Day, when the man gives flowers or chocolate to the woman he loves, doesn't want to do it. She particularly doesn't want to participate in the Japanese custom of giri choko, duty chocolate, which is the name given to chocolate given by women to male co-workers or colleagues in a purely social contract having nothing to do with love. What she doesn't know is that Sayako is convinced she is about to die of an illness and wants her son to have this experience of receiving a gift from a foreigner. The contrasts between the Western and Japanese women's family lives and attitudes, and the fact that each is completely unaware of the other's situation, are what makes this story go. At the time of writing, I was much more sensitive to the differences between my own culture and Japanese society, the fantasies and imperatives which drive both, and what happens when we have the courage to live with both at the same time. This is the kind of thing that happens when you live in another culture for a long time. You have the chance to think deeply about your own life as well as the lives of those around you. This is very interesting as well as significant, and it is constantly happening. I had a very good and enlightening time imagining the life of Sayako in particular. My training as a Japanese wife helped me here. Of course, I think Sayako is a rather old-fashioned character now, but she is traditional. They have different traditions and they both want to honor them. This story's voice alternates between the 2 women. Since my voice cannot make this distinction, I will indicate where the changes occur by mentioning the women's names at the beginning of each section. The Japanese translation of Love and Duty was made by Yoshiko Sato of the Fruitful English Translation class. This section is entitled Friday. It starts with Wednesday and Thursday. Now we're on to Friday. Joanne. The next morning when Joanne came to work, she saw a white envelope carefully positioned in the middle of her desk. Feeling like a submarine officer upping periscope, she raised her head cautiously and glanced down the rows of teachers' desks, each with its occupant busy getting ready for the school day. Ms. Kikuchi was there, but she seemed to be searching through a drawer, her head almost invisible. Ms. Kikuchi is Sayako. Joanne angled herself so her back was turned directly to Ms. Kikuchi and picked up the envelope. No markings of any kind. Instead, inside, she found a folded piece of white paper, which, when unfolded, showed the large, wobbly pencil printing of a small child. In Japanese, it said, "Please give me chocolate, sensei." It was signed Kikuchi Kenji and surrounded by drawings of flying Kit Kat bars. Oh boy, thought Joanne, she's raised the stakes, and I know what I have to do now. It's something I should have done right at the beginning. Leaving the note on her desk, Joanne stood up, walked straight to the principal's office at the end of the teacher's room, and knocked on the door. Hearing a muffled grunt of acknowledgement, she went in. "Good morning, Joanne Sensei." "Don't let it get to you," she told herself. "Principal Sensei, may I please have a moment?" "Yes." Principal Goto was a large, heavy-set, middle-aged man. Though he had a kind face, his bulk was intimidating. Joanne found it a little hard to know where to begin. "I'm afraid I have to complain about the inappropriate behavior of one of my fellow teachers," she finally said, and briefly recounted Ms. Kikuchi's escalating requests over the past 3 days. Principal Goto regarded her for a moment. "In what way do you regard this as inappropriate? Was Kikuchi rude or insulting to you?" In spite of over a decade of schooling herself in the ways of this country, Joanne felt her anger growing. Her eyes snapped. "Principal Sensei, I am a Westerner. We have certain ideas about these holidays that are different from Japanese people's, and I don't feel I should be forced to participate in your rituals." "Did you explain this to her?" "Yes, I did, but she doesn't seem to understand. I came to you because I resent being bothered in the workplace with something I regard as a personal request. Kikuchi Sensei is taking advantage of her status as my colleague to get something from me." As Joanne spoke, she saw Principal Goto's eyes glaze over. She knew he was about to take refuge in platitudes. "You know, Joanne Sensei, my job as principal is to promote the smooth running of the school for everyone's benefit. The teachers need to teach and the students need to learn. Anything that disrupts this should come to my notice. Is Kikuchi's request preventing you from doing your job?" "No," Joanne admitted, "but I have been disturbed by it, and since it happened at work, I felt I should come to you." "Well, I suppose I could talk to her, tell her how you feel. I'm not sure what her reaction will be, since it is evident that she doesn't think she is guilty of any wrongdoing. Would you prefer to be present?" "No, that's all right. Thank you for your time." Feeling that she had accomplished as much as could be expected, Joanne withdrew. Sayako. She's seen the letter, thought Sayako, peering between the stacked books on her desk toward Joanne Sensei. Now she's opening it. With a gasp of dismay, she watched the other woman straighten up and march straight to the principal's office. Surely this didn't have anything to do with her or with the letter. Her heart raced as she collected her teaching materials in preparation for the first class. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Joanne Sensei come out, her heels tapping angrily, and sail out the door leading to the classrooms without a glance in her direction. No question, the visit to the principal had definitely been about her. Sayako's mind raced. Would she lose her job? She had heard of such things happening after contretemps with foreign teachers. She had to keep working, had to keep saving for Kenji's sake. There was so little time left, but the principal would never understand. How could Joanne Sensei have caused so much trouble so casually? Terrible visions chased each other around in her head, and big black blobs began to obscure her vision. Not now, she breathed deeply. Excuse me, Kikuchi-sensei, the secretary approached her. Would you mind stepping into Principal Sensei's office for a moment? Summoning all her strength, Sayako smiled at the secretary. Certainly, she whispered. She felt the stinging darts of the other teachers' curious gazes on her back as she knocked and entered. Good morning, Principal Sensei. You wish to see me? Yes, Principal Goto harumphed. I'm sorry to disturb you just before class, but I just had a visit from Joanne Sensei. She says you have been asking her to give Valentine's Day chocolate to your son. She seems upset by this request. I'm not sure where I come into it, but Sayako was aghast. To bother the principal with such a thing? Scarlet shame chased pale fear across her face. I don't know what to say, Principal Sensei. I had no idea she would get so upset. It is all my fault. I implore you to let the matter drop. Well, that's what I would like to do, but you know, I must keep everyone happy, and that includes the foreign employees. Would you mind offering her an apology? Yes, of course, I will apologize to her. Principal Sensei, I am so ashamed. Please forget you ever heard about this matter. You have nothing to worry about. Principal Goto's face relaxed with relief. His Japanese sensibility told him that an apology would fix everything. Now, we must all get to work. Nothing further needs to be said about this. Good day. Sachiko never knew how she got out of the principal's room. Joanne. To avoid an unpleasant scene, Joanne dashed to her first class as soon as her interview with Principal Goto was over. She felt a little wobbly after bearding the principal in his den, but the routine of work had a calming effect. At lunchtime, she returned to her desk and took her sandwich out of her bag. The other teachers seemed quieter than usual, and that was kind of peaceful. She ate her lunch, reading a book at the same time, and went to her afternoon classes without encountering Ms. Kikuchi. So far, so good. Maybe Mr. Principal Goto's little talk had done the trick. In any case, Valentine's Day was tomorrow, and there was no school. So that was the end of the tale of the math teacher and her greedy, chocolate-loving son. As Joanne was about to leave for the day, the secretary approached her desk, holding a large white card. Excuse me, Joanne Sensei, would you like to sign this? Joanne flicked her eyes toward the card. It was a shikishi, a traditional group message card, and seemed already to have about 20 messages written on it. Unlike other shikishi Joanne had seen, this one was pure white, and all the messages were written in black. What's this for? One of the teachers was taken ill this morning and is now in the Daiichi Hospital in critical condition. We are sending her a get well message. Joanne fumbled for a black pen. That is terrible. Which teacher was it? The math teacher, Kikuchi Sensei. Sayako. Sayako was swimming in dark brown depths. She felt large and soft, warm and peaceful. Then a light appeared, floating toward her through the murk. As it approached, she felt herself shrink and dwindle into something more like her usual small, hard, conscious self. She opened her eyes. Everything was white, not brown. Drifting in the white was a tan-colored blob that gradually resolved itself into the top half of a face she didn't know. The bottom half was obscured by a surgical mask. So, Kikuchi-san, you are awake. That's good. I am Dr. Masashi, and you are in the Daiichi Hospital. Hospital? Sayako murmured. All the secrecy and pain of the past several months returned in a rush. She felt tears of shame gather in her eyes. Did you find it? The tumor? We certainly did. Everyone was surprised it was so large. How long have you been hiding it? I knew I didn't have much time left, Sayako said brokenly. I didn't want to spend my last months on Earth in a hospital, wasting money, causing trouble to everyone, causing grief to my husband and my son. I wanted everything to be nice for them, right up to the end. The doctor blinked. End? What end? We took the tumor out. It was benign. Everything is fine now. You just need to rest. You are exhausted and underfed, as well as being ill. You women always take too much on yourselves. Why, I wonder? His eyes twinkled and he left the room. Sayako closed her eyes and snuggled down in the bed with a huge sigh. Why do we women do what we do? Don't you know, doctor? Don't you know, my husband, Kenji, Joanne Sensei? Because of love. It's all about love. Later, when Sayako next left the dark brown place for the white place, she noticed a patch of red in the middle of her field of vision. She focused gradually on the nightstand beside her. There sat a Kit Kat bar, topped with a miniature red bow and a small note in English. To Kenji, happy Valentine's Day from Joanne Sensei. Sayako smiled sleepily. Her thin white hand went out to the chocolate bar. She carefully removed the little red ribbon and set it aside. Then she unwrapped the Kit Kat and ate it down to the last crumb. Thank you very much.